What's poppin', everybody? Welcome back to a brand new video. Are you trying to get that film grain look with halation and maybe even some bloom in there? Well, this company Dehancer hit me up out of the blue. Never heard of them in my life until like a month ago. And they asked me to do a review on their product and basically in exchange just be able to use it for a month. And that's the agreement that we have. They told me to just give my true opinion on this, so that's what I'm gonna do for you guys to tell you if this is worth it or not. So let's jump into it. Dope. And as you can see, I went ahead and found a clip that has the most non-amount of grain in it to show you what we can do with this effect. Just a little bit before we really dive deep into it, what the effect is called Dehancer Pro version 1.3 is the effect that I'm using. If you guys look up this company, Dehancer, they created film emulant design for their effects, and it's used for any type of video that you got going on here. And the one thing that I want to just say first off is it has so many different options here. As you can see, we have input, film developer, and the list goes on and on. And in my opinion, that is a lot of information and a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily need. But this product does do one thing very well, and that is these things we're going to focus on here specifically is going to be the film section here, a little bit here on the expand, and then also on the film grain. After film grain, the ones I want to look at after this is going to be halation and bloom, and everything else, honestly, in my opinion, isn't really worth looking at. The one thing that might be helpful for all of you when we get into it is false color, and you can actually have an understanding here of the false color for any kind of color grading assist. So this really helps you out in color grading, especially if you're in Adobe Premiere, After Effects, or even in Resolve. But it's just a kind of built-in program that helps you with exposure on this and false colors. As you can see, we have our grid here that we could use for that. One other feature I want to talk about is the Lut Generator. It's pretty cool. So you can actually create this as a Lut and export the Lut, so you can use it anytime you want to create any video. You just plop that Lut in there and you can get a move on with it. Stick around a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the Dehancer specifically, but the biggest thing I really want to get into is their film grain is remarkable. I haven't seen anything like this. Very impressed with what they've done here. Obviously they specialize in doing this, so they're going to put a lot of effort into creating a film emulate kind of thing, and the halation honestly is quite amazing as well. We'll jump in that in a little bit, but I just want to give you an overview of this whole Dehancer to give you guys an understanding if this is a product for you or not. Going in here, we have our input. We can actually change the source of if it's a Rec 7 or 9 or not. That way it's a little bit of a color grading tool assist in this, where you can actually change whole lot more settings than if you were to go into lumetri color. That's the one thing that I don't really love about this, is that you have so many different options, and honestly I would love to see Dehancer as just having the film, the film grain here, halation, bloom, and honestly that's about it. When you get through, you can actually see how this translates to if you were in lumetri color or not. We can see that we have our temperature and tint, which is obviously gonna be the same thing in color, lumetri, and then if you actually come over here to expand, we have our black points and we have our white points, and they have these things where you can enable every single one, so you have to check manually on each one. I feel like it does a better job of controlling the blacks and the whites, but again, it's just kind of unnecessary, because when you're actually doing color grading in lumetri color, I'd rather do it in lumetri color even in Resolve if I'm going to put this file into Resolve, rather than having to do the color all in here with the film emulation. I'd rather have those separated entirely, not even in one effect. Coming on here, after we go on from the expand, I want to talk about print. We get to see a little bit of how we can change the exposure, and again, just more settings for total contrast, color density, and saturation. Just again, like lumetri color, nothing else really on that. The color head, we actually have the same thing as if you were to go to HSL color with the curves and all of that. These actually are your curve levels that you'd be working with, and the same thing with the shadow tone, midtone, and highlight tone, and preserve exposure. That might be a little bit helpful, but again, it's just kind of redundant if you're looking to do color grading outside of this, which in my opinion I think is best to do that. Well, this goes on from here, from vignette down all the way down to your Lut Generator output. The one cool thing, like I mentioned, is the false color, which you don't have that built into Adobe Premiere, which is really cool to have if you're in that space. That's kind of my overall feel for the effect. I love some parts of it, and the other parts I'm like, we could totally go without it, doesn't need to be there. But to each person its own. So if you think you want all that, then cool, go for it. If not, this still has an amazing film emulation that I want to get into here that's super exciting for you guys. We're gonna start with film, and basically any LUT that you put on here, make sure you just enable it, because sometimes you can forget. You have different types of film, not bad, and you can work with it and really give you that film look that you want. And then you can actually change the LUT itself by coming in here with the film developer and really working with the contrast and all that stuff. As you can see, we're just going all out on it, and honestly it's pretty cool to work with this. And after the film developer, we also just have film compression, so you can work again with what's going on here in your compression settings and mess around and find the best setting for you and what works best for that absolutely perfect film look that you're trying to get. And then after that, we're gonna go ahead and jump down to the film grain. Film grain, this one is what I'm kind of most excited about. So we're actually gonna jump in this, and we're just gonna jack this thing up to, so you can see crap ton of film and grain on here in the film that we're getting. And if you bring it down to a setting that you really are starting to like, you can see that it's really pulling in our film effect look, and it's quite amazing, especially the control over the settings that you have. You have tons of just effects that you can work with on this. You can make this footage look like real film. If you can see that when I adjust this adjustment layer, turn it on and off, you can see what it's doing and how well it actually does it. Holds detail, but also adds in that film grain that we're looking for. And another cool thing about this is we can actually come into our resolution and change that. So we can make this a lower resolution feel, which is actually really cool to see. Again, you have so much more control over the settings of what's going on with this film grain, and it's a lot better than if you were to just use some kind of preset setting, or even another plugin for that matter. I've used a lot of plugins, and this film grain plugin is quite amazing. So again, a bunch of more settings and more control, which actually makes you get the film look that you desire to have. Instead of shooting it in film, you can shoot it on a red and give it more of a film look. So moving on from that, from film grain, I want to talk about halation. Now halation is really cool on this because again, you just have a lot more control, and you don't have to like recreate it from scratch or anything like that. There's an effect in here, and I know they have it in Resolve. Resolve pretty good too, but still there's a lot more steps into it that you have to create, versus where in Adobe Premiere, you can have this plugin in Adobe Premiere, After Effects, even Photoshop and Resolve, so you can use this in there. But this is just a really good halation emulation. I mean, look at this, halation emulation. Halation emulation, and look, I mean, it's pretty doggone good, I'm not gonna lie. I was kind of surprised when I saw it and how well it looked. Compared to, you know, creating it yourself, but like just so much more control over these settings that you have to really mess around and find the perfect look that you're trying to get. Moving on from halation, we also have bloom, which I also find very awesome to have for that film emulation look that you're trying to just really grab. Highlights, the source limiter, you have details so you can maintain that or not. Even some diffusion on here. We can amplify what's going on, and you can see what bloom is doing, especially around these higher peak things. It's giving that glow effect, if you will, but it's not like actual glow effect. And this is really cool because there's not many effects out there where you can get it, again, third-party plugins where you can get a nice bloom like this. And now you have a really good control over all of these settings. And if you kind of just put them all together, you can see that we have a really good looking film, like really good looking film image going on right here. And if we just go ahead and toggle the before and after, I mean, this is game changing. And the thing that we're really looking at is the fact that it's maintaining a lot of the detail in here while it's keeping that film style effect. And that's exactly what you want to have when you're doing this, is not to ruin your quality of image, but also have that cool emulation of the film. So guys, I highly suggest that you at least check out this plugin, because I was kind of impressed by how much quality you're able to keep with a great looking film look. Like I said, I hate the fact that it has so many different effects and it's just kind of unnecessary. I think their mindset behind it was definitely to give you more control over color grading process.